Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. The Disruptance Podcast is the show that disrupts the way entrepreneurs think to make them more profitable and impactful. Rethink tired and outdated business norms to welcome innovation and unlock your unlimited possibilities. Here are your hosts, Forney and Greg Fowler.
I want to dive into this one because I know that it's really important for everybody to really dialogue this out. And the conversation dropping in is to profit and loss statements, P&Ls, bringing them back. the sexiest topic on the planet. There's no Justin Timberlake, although there should be an intro from him, with that song if we get the jingle in there. But to really turn everybody on, I'm going to read this from Investopedia. Profit and loss P&L statement refers to a financial statement that summarizes the revenue, costs, and expenses incurred during a specific period of time. So, Eric, I know you're turned on right now, man. Like, this is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. We've lost all of our listeners already, right?
Everybody's gone.
Yeah.
So, Eric, why does this matter? I want to get your take on this. I mean, you doing what you do to the level you do it at, this is going to be big coming from you and to all entrepreneurs and real estate professionals. So where do you want to start? I guess, why does this matter? What are your thoughts behind P&L?
Two things. One, P&Ls don't matter. And two, P&Ls are everything.
Tell me more.
So right now, someone's going, okay, Eric, you make no sense. So let me unpack that. Here's the difference. Understand that when you operate a small business, that cash flow is what matters. Okay. You cannot survive without cash flow. Cash flow is your oxygen. A P&L is a report card for work you did in the past. And so the mistake that people make oftentimes is that they think about operating their business from the framework of requiring a P&L, and they operate their personal life on cash flow. No one goes to the drive-through and goes, I need to pull out my profit and loss statement while I'm at Starbucks to see if I can buy this venti chocomocha latte thing. I'm going to buy it because I know I have the money in my account. Okay, so people over-index on profit and losses in real estate, especially, and they under-index on cash flow and understanding what generates cash flow and what diminishes cash flow. At the end of the day, those are the two most important components of this. When we think about P&Ls, what happens is most agents and entrepreneurs, they shut down and get overwhelmed. I think of P&Ls like this, Greg, is that I don't know how to read sheet music. You probably do. You probably have the voice of an angel, but I do not know how to read sheet music. However, I imagine that sheet music, when someone who understands it, they look at it and it plays the song for them. They understand it. They translate notes and squiggly lines into words and music. I see a P&L the same way. I can look at a P&L and understand the song that it sings. Most do not, and that's okay. You don't need to necessarily. You do need to understand the fundamental principles of what's the cash flow, what diminishes my cash flow. We can start to then unpack everything from there.
Love it. And again, that's why everybody's here, Eric. They're here to learn, to grow. And these are fundamental, important shifts for a business as an entrepreneur and as a real estate professional. So let's keep diving into that, looking at it from that standpoint. What are your thoughts behind it? What are people looking for? Maybe going into the mistakes, however you want to unpack this.
So, I look at P&Ls all the time for business owners, and, truth be told is some of the most successful business owners in the country. I look at the P&Ls. In fact, I literally have two of them on my desk right now and did not do that by design. I've drawn all over these things. One of the things here, what I find is there are patterns. There are patterns for those that are the most profitable and those that struggle consistently with profitability. And so I want to share what I find are the most common mistakes, especially in real estate businesses, so that the listener can avoid them. The most common one that I see is where someone has a job for a business. And what I mean by that, Greg, is that there's a business owner, a leader, a rainmaker, someone who is working, leading agents, leading operations people, and also selling real estate at the same time. And most of the time, what I find is that the salespeople in the organization don't actually cover the expenses of the organization, which means the owner has to go out and sell every day in order to pay for the agents or the salespeople to work less and make their life easier.
Wow. Unreal.
The point of owning an asset is to generate income from the asset. Otherwise, you should just go out and work a job.
Well said. Yeah, and I feel that a lot of entrepreneurs and real estate professionals fall into that category, unfortunately, Eric. So the idea behind that is, how is it mitigated? If somebody finds themselves tuning into this and they feel, wow, you literally just described my life, Eric. I don't know how you did that.
Yeah.
You're amazing. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
How do they overcome? How do they readjust or evaluate?
So the one of the biggest mistakes I find is that when we see a small business P&L, what we find is that they've really ended up lumping all of the revenue into one pile, and they consider all revenue to be equal in the eyes of their business's P&L.
Ooh.
And the reality is that revenue in this instance comes in two forms. The revenue is how much did the sales team generate? How much revenue did I generate as the owner or the leader? They should be in two different categories, or they should be considered mentally as two different things. So for the rainmaker, for the business owner who's still out selling, they should deduct a portion of that income, of that revenue, as the job income. That's money they worked to receive. A portion of that money that they worked to receive goes to the owner. A portion of it then goes back into the business pot. At the end of the day, you look and say, do I have money left over at the end of the month? If I didn't sell anything, would everyone's bills have been paid in the company? And if the answer is yes, and you have something left over, then you made money on the business. If not, you have a job. And everyone else's life is made easier because your life is made more difficult. It's not the reason to own a business.
Well said.
You can do both, by the way, Greg. I don't want people to be delusioned to think that you shouldn't also own a business to make people's life easier. The number one reason to own a business is to solve a problem in the marketplace. So I wake up every day as a business owner and think, how do I make my people more successful? Because if I can make them more successful, I know that I, as a byproduct, become more successful because it's structured in a way in which when they win, I win. I don't want it to be where they win, I lose a little, because eventually I'm going to run out of oxygen.
Wow. And looking at it from a win-win situation, as you stated there, Eric, I think that's crucially important. But you have to know what's happening and essentially what your directive is so that you can go down that road. If you're just going at it blindly, and there's so many entrepreneurs and especially into real estate professionals where they're people, right? And they think, hey, this is a sales position and I'm here to engage with the consumer and I'm help them buy and sell homes. And that's kind of where it all lies and stops. But the idea is this is a business. You got to treat it like a business. If you're going to be sustainable.
Otherwise just go do it. Literally, there's nothing wrong. One of the mistakes our industry has made from a real estate perspective is that it's villainized the individual agent.
Okay.
It's arguably one of the best jobs on the planet if you love the job. I loved being a real estate agent. God forbid I had to go back and be a real estate agent. Boo-hoo. Right there. I mean, it's a fantastic job. And so if that's what you love doing, then do it. There's no downside to doing that. We've aggrandized this concept of having these giant businesses and thinking that that's the only path to wealth and monetization. The reality is you can sell real estate and have a great life with great people and make more than enough income. Or any other widget that you sell. You can sell knives, or you could sell, social media and marketing consulting, 1,000,001 things. Salespeople get paid well. You don't have to have people to build a business in order to achieve your goals. But if you're going to have a business, you should make money and it should match your lifestyle.
Love that.
Otherwise, that's for charity.
Well, saying that, if you're wanting to help people, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day.
Correct. What I see is that leaders end up devoting their time to helping their people to make their life easier. But the leader ends up at the end of the day, with all this discontent and resentment for the organization, because the leader gets no benefit from that investment, and they would be better off just selling and working charity, helping people who need the help.
And Eric, you're dealing out or dishing out the tough pills for everybody to swallow here. But that's the point. I mean, to increase and to get better, you have to tear down. You have to look at it with a true, honest intention. Look in the mirror and say, where am I? What am I trying to do? And how can I improve? So, what other mistakes, Eric? Yeah. I mean, you have so much perspective. So, what else?
So, one of the other things, and I made the same mistake so many times, this is an easy one to do, and that is not paying for performance. We're over-indexing on fixed expenses without thinking about whether they're being paid for the result that you're hiring them for. And so what we see is that a lot of people will end up carrying this big albatross around their neck. They'll have their expenses are weighted down with really high salaried employees. I'm all about paying people as much as you can pay them.
Right.
Get the right people, pay them above the market, and treat them well so that they treat the customer well. But don't go too far on the pay side to where it actually causes the business to suffer and the people inside of the business to suffer because you've over-indexed on not paying for results.
And Eric, with that, and I think a lot of real estate professionals as time are good, right? When transactions are happening and things are moving forward in that direction and positive, that can kind of come into play. So what's your advice on really kind of getting a hold of that or stopping that in the first place? I mean, how are you evaluating what to pay and how to pay and, to really keep that in perspective?
I'll tell you that part is one of the most difficult components to think through. What I can tell you from doing it wrong many times and watching it consistently be done wrong is really thinking about incentive structures. I love to study Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's business partner at Berkshire Hathaway. Charlie Munger has some of the best advice on life and mental models. And, one of the things that he says is, show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior. And what he means by that is that if you have a poorly designed incentive structure, you should expect the results to be poor compared to what you desire the results to be. And so, I think of it's like, hey, if your job is to go out and sell as many widgets as possible, and there's no qualifier to the number of widgets that you sell, then you'll sell them at whatever price, and you'll likely sell them at a negative profit margin. Because you're not incentivized to make the company any money. You're just incentivized to sell as many units as possible if the incentive structure is wrong. And so understanding that the compensation has to stack up to the company's goals or for the role's goals.
Big. Love it. Huge advice into that. I think being intentional with that is massive. There's no doubt. So where else do you want to go? Eric, I know there's a lot.
When I think about mistakes here, I've got a few more that come to mind. I see people in an organization, there's this fascinating social experiment, Greg, where if you were in a group project with me in school, you are fully aware of how this works. The more people you put into a group project, the less work that gets done.
Too many cooks in the kitchen, right, Eric?
That's right. And that actually plays out in real time in a business. There's this premise of social loafing causes more people to do less or more people to generate less output. And so what I find is that companies have a ton of staff and people on payroll and a huge amount of excess capacity. You know, when you think about generating solar power and you look at the Tesla model, one thing that Tesla and other solar companies have sold homeowners and business owners on is this idea of generating power, storing the power, and selling your excess back to the grid or the power company. That's basically having a zero waste energy system of energy independence for the building, for the home. But business owners rarely think about how to monetize and manage their excess capacity. And so most companies are walking around with excess capacity. Don't believe me? Just go look at what Twitter did when they laid off the bulk of their staff. They seem to still be doing incredibly well in spite of the headlines. Facebook had layoffs. Amazon had layoffs. Google had layoffs. All these companies had layoffs. And funny enough, they all work better today than they did the day before they started those layoffs because of excess capacity. Wow. Understand what you pay people to do and what they do, and if it's actually needed and if it's a full-time job.
I think that's huge perspective for people to look at into their businesses. But Eric, I mean, there's also on a personal note, I mean, there's so many of us walking around with excess. And if we look at it from expenses, I mean, there are literally well, you think about it, there are companies that will analyze your subscription base and cut things out for you that you don't. I mean, there's literally companies that are trying to cut out your excess because you're too busy and or lazy, or unbeknownst to you that you've got 30 different subscriptions to different channels that you don't even watch. I mean, to me, it's fascinating to human behavior in that structure. There's just, it's wasteful.
Well, I here's the thing is, Warren Buffett has this interesting story where he talks about how he was out playing golf with a group of guys, and they were all super poor, like Warren Buffett. People that hang out with Warren Buffett would be
extremely,
right. And so they're out playing golf, and it's maybe a par 3 or something. And one of the guys that Buffett's golfing with says, "Hey, I'll bet you $10,000 that you can't hit a hole in one." And Buffett said, "Okay, well then, what do I lose if I don't hit it? Like, what's my buy-in?" And I think it was like $100.
Okay.
And Buffett said, "Nope, no deal." So he was if he put $100 in on the bet, he was going to get paid $10,000. Here's a guy who's worth, a couple $100 billion almost, who said, "No, I won't put $100 into that bet." And when asked about it, what he said, "I know that my odds were worse than 1 in 100. They were likely worse than 1 in 10,000. And therefore I wouldn't have taken that bet, because how you treat $1 is how you treat all dollars."
Ooh, wow.
And so what I find is the people who spend money in their personal life with excess capacity spend money in their business to excess capacity.
Wow. That is a very, to the core, to the bone statement. I think another way to reiterate that for everybody out there, just to really hone in, is that old adage, Eric. It's the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So whether it's financial or relational or health wise, I mean, it ends up compounding and being a mirror image of one or the other. And that's a very, very deep thought for everybody to kind of look at and be honest with.
It's a symptom of belief system. It's how you think about money. I remember Gary Keller said one time something to the effect of like, even if it's $100, then and it's not generating you a positive outcome, you shouldn't spend it. And here's a guy who he's not quite Warren Buffett, but he's certainly not clipping coupons either.
He's doing all right.
Yeah. And so, in typical fashion, Gary, I have to process what Gary says and to understand what he means by what he says. And how I understood it to be was that what he went on to say was that you don't have the right to determine whether $100 means something to someone else. It might mean nothing to you, but it might be everything to someone else. Wow. Therefore, you don't have permission to waste it. And when you run a business and you opt to succeed through other people, you have a fiduciary duty to the organization so that no one loses their job and their livelihood and their family and their house and the ability to provide because you wasted money because you couldn't restrain yourself about excess capacity.
Wow.
That's something that keeps me up at night.
Mm-hmm.
Not literally anymore, but figuratively, in the sense of it's never been lost on me that I have a fiduciary duty to the people that I work with, that when I make a commitment to them that the company will be profitable and I can pay their salary, that I have to be a good steward of the company and my personal finances so that it never jeopardizes or compromises the mission and their livelihood.
Wow.
I would be devastated and so embarrassed to have to go back and say, hey, you know what? I'm really sorry. I went out and bought a new Bentley, and so not going to be able to make payroll because sales went down a little bit. I don't want to have to go back on my commitment because I did something that benefited me exclusively. And so thinking around that is your capacity starts at home, and how you spend in your personal life, it carries over to how you show up and spend in the business. And then, one of the other mistakes that I see happen so often, Greg, is that people pay for solutions to the wrong problems.
Oh, love that. All right. Let's hear this, Eric. This is a big one.
Yeah. So I don't know why this is what comes to my mind. It's like getting a push-up bra instead of getting plastic surgery.
Hey, wait a minute. We did say bring in the sexy back, right? So
that's right.
So you're going there, Eric. I love it.
So we brought a solution, but it doesn't solve the core problem, right? We brought the illusion of a solution instead of the root cause problem itself. The way that I see this show up in businesses on a regular basis is that what people really want is more revenue, more profit. They want more salespeople, and they want to have them stay longer. At the end of the day, that's usually about it. They want better people, more money, and they want the people that are good to stay with them as long as humanly possible.
Well said.
And so when you think about then how you allocate capital or resources, if it doesn't directly go to those core principles, you're spending resources to solve the wrong problem.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of things that people negotiate with themselves and with each other about spending money that they believe will solve some secondary or tertiary problem within the business that won't roll up directly to influence those core tenets. And that's a really, really common one, which is like, hey, but if we got this new transaction management system and we got this new invoicing and auto pay billing system, what would happen is we'd be more profitable. And then you go, awesome. Show me where that would show up then on that profit and loss statement. Where would I see that show up? Is what you're telling me the number one reason why you're not profitable today is because of the invoicing system, the payroll system, the transaction management software. That's literally your number one core problem to solve. Awesome. Then let's interrogate that, right? Knowing that when we interrogate that, it's rarely ever the case because there's no direct line roll up to it. But people pay money for costly solutions to the wrong problems that don't get them the outcome that they want.
Wow. I think that looking at it from that standpoint, though, Eric, a lot of people are probably thinking to themselves, so, what are the identified, problems to really invest in? And I'm assuming that that's a stacked evolutionary answer, right? Depends on where you're at, what your goals are, what's going on into that. But is there any thoughts or advice on that? I mean, when people are looking at it, and especially using their P&L as almost that guideline, right? Show me where it shows up here. I mean, I love the way that you're explaining this, but any takeaways for the audience and any deeper dive on that?
Yeah. So there's three. You've got these first principles of capitalism. I think I mentioned the other day, which is like that you have to generate revenue, as every company that happens to be a sales company, which I think is all companies. Every sales company has to generate revenue. Secondarily, then every company should think about expense mitigation, minimizing the money that they spend. And then third is everyone should be thinking about resource optimization or time optimization. Time being the most important, because if you optimize the resources, you optimize time.
Wow.
And so then I think of it that it goes, okay, so those are the three core levers that I can move inside of the business to make the business more efficient. Or, which leads me into my next mistake, which would be, is people wrap the boat instead of making the boat go faster.
Ooh.
So what happens is people lose sight of the fact that there are those three core tenets of more revenue, fewer expenses, more efficiency. And then instead they go, you know what would help us sell more lawn care, help us sell more knives, more real estate is if we wrap this boat with our fancy slogan and our character and we drove around and played a jingle.
There you go.
None of that directly makes the boat go faster. It might, but you would likely need some sort of hypothesis and results, some sort of smaller case study that would make you believe that would generate you more revenue. Because it certainly won't minimize expenses, and it certainly won't optimize time and resources.
There you go.
So you're over-indexing that will generate you more revenue, and there likely are far better strategies. So what happens then is in an organization, because success is actually simple, people opt for distraction. And the distraction becomes is what we should spend money on is we should wrap the boat instead of making the boat go faster, instead of putting a bigger engine in, making the boat longer, having a better driver, getting rid of dead weight, all of the things that impede the ability to actually get the desired result, which is making the boat go faster.
So Eric, let me ask you this, because that is the case, and I 100% agree with you. Why is the generalized public and or professionals so flawed into this? Because I think that so many people would go to wrapping the boat. And where's the disconnect there? What's your perspective on that? Right? I mean,
a lot of it is groupthink. So when I see one of the most eye-opening things for me has been to see other companies' P&Ls. You know, I remember when I bought my Keller Williams franchise, we gathered net worth statements from the other investors, and I learned so much from looking at other people's net worth statements. Wow. I didn't have a conversation with them, but I looked at it and said, "Oh, that's interesting. You have this much money, and this is how you've allocated your money in order to have this much of a net worth. That's pretty interesting. What could I learn from that example?" And so that type of transparency gives you real world transparent insights. What most of the world sees instead is someone standing on a stage, someone sitting on a podcast, someone flexing on Instagram, telling you about the money that they make without letting you know that what they look like naked is nothing that you want to look like. And so most businesses, when you strip away the dressings, look nothing like anything that you want to look like, but they project an entirely different story. And so it's that projection of social manipulation it's unintended most of the time.
Sure.
It wouldn't make sense to go out and say, you know what, my business really sucks right now. I'm losing a bunch of money. Anybody want to join? Come on. Great growth strategy. And so most people, like dating, most people only put the biggest fish they caught, the 97 Camaro that they drove, and the highlights that their mother said about them in their bio in order to get a first date. That's what going to a conference is like. People tell you about all the good things about them without telling you that they live in mom's basement, they have VD and credit card debt up to their ears. And so the transparency is what causes, or lack of transparency is what causes people to believe that the secret to success is what's projected from other people. The secret to success is actually sustainable principles and simplicity.
Wow. And I think that That once again, this episode to me is incredible, Eric, because it's just airing out so many thought processes or issues that so many people have, and it's those terrible adages of fake it till you make it, and perception is reality sort of scenario, and there is a level of posture.
Dude, look, I mean, you don't have to go that far on the archives of the internet to find the two of us in 3-piece suits and good looking hair. I mean, yours way better than mine, but nonetheless, the fake it till you make it method is not a bad strategy. Right. You just have to know when to pull the plug on fake it till you make it, and what you fake and then what you have to make is understand that you have I think of it this way. That's like, when I turn this mic on, or when I go on to any other, conversation anywhere, or, a conference, if I'm speaking publicly, I have a fiduciary duty to tell the truth to the audience, because there's someone in the audience that's where I was 10 years ago, who's broke and doesn't know how they're going to figure their way out of it. Wow. Who maybe has no hope or no strategy. And so if I go and tell big fish stories about the way out, I've potentially done that person a huge disservice and caused possibly irreparable harm. Wow. I see that happen over and over. So instead of standing on a stage and proclaiming the second coming, it would make far more sense to tell accurate stories of authentic failures and recoveries than it would to paint the most optimistic portrait of things that are only mildly true.
I would agree with that, Eric. And to me, from a marketing and positioning standpoint, the authenticity and transparency is everything. And I think that in the culture that we have been molding in our society, of that posturing on Lamborghinis and private jets and mansions and all these fabricated, faked lifestyles, it's people see through it. And I think ultimately, most importantly, no one's connecting with that. Yeah, is it entertaining? Is it eye-catching? Possibly. Is it getting stale? Absolutely. Are people getting inundated by that from so many different self-proclaimed gurus, experts, multimillionaire, billionaire sort of standpoints? Everybody's an expert. Everybody knows. But I think having that truth and sincerity into your life and into your goals, where you came from, where you're going, ultimately, that's a truthful and honest life and perspective and positioning. And you're going to connect with so many more people in a much deeper and more meaningful way. And ultimately, your business is going to be affected in a positive. That's how I believe from a marketing standpoint and an overall positioning standpoint with content creation and distribution. So I love that. I really do.
So, Greg, one of the things then is we've kind of gotten these common failures. And there are more, of course. I could make a list of things that I hate, but there's just no reason because principally it's understanding that when you own a business, don't work a job for the business to make other people's life easier and make yours more difficult. Pay for performance, have the incentives align with your objectives, manage excess capacity. You're going to want to understand the problem you want to solve and the solution to solve the actual core problem itself. And then does it make the boat go faster? Objectively, does what we're doing make the boat go faster? And so when we understand those concepts, we internalize them and say, okay, these are the 5 commandments of my P&L of waste. Then I can go, okay, well, so I've violated the 5 sins, and now I need to figure out how I'm going to go repent and get right in the eyes of the Lord and Savior P&L here. And the action plan then becomes is you treat the business in reality like an emergency room. What you don't walk into an emergency room and see is people loafing and slowly wandering around with time and without urgency. They go in and they cut and they move with urgency. They move with efficiency because the vital signs are what matter most. Everything that's not vital is a distraction in the ER. And so as a business, I have to move quickly to ensure that my vitals are stable and trending in the right direction. Everything else is everything else. One of the ways that you can do that from an action plan perspective, if you're someone who, like me, is sometimes in the winter we get a little chubby, and the way that we can quickly cut that dead weight is I like to cancel credit cards. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't do this, but I like to think about canceling credit cards because the fastest way to find out what you're wasting money on is to get a call from a debt collector. And then you can quickly decide if you noticed it was missing or anyone else in the organization noticed it was gone. Because what I find is most of the time, no one in the organization notices that the thing you used to spend money on, you're no longer spending money on, and nothing changed. And so,
Eric, and that's going to hit right here to the audience. So do you have an example, that you've done that where it was maybe something small that you thought, hey, is anybody actually using this in the organization and no one noticed? I mean,
all the time, dude. So,
okay.
couple things. So, on the sales team side, I cut our for sale by owner and expired list and phone service regularly. Because if you won't do it every day, I can't support your success, because what I believe is that if you won't be consistent with something, you can't be successful with something. I can't look like a Greek god like Greg and be in amazing shape if I don't consistently eat right and work out right. And so if it's not consistent, it's not successful.
You can't be further from the truth there, Eric. I appreciate the flattery there, but further from the truth.
So I'd like to think about canceling things that people use sparingly. In fact, I put a list together, Greg, of what I've called my DEFCON 5 list of business expenses, and I try to keep that on an ongoing and regular basis. Which is that if we go to nuclear war, what must I keep for nuclear war? And then what would I do if all of the world were at peace and business was so easy? We were printing money like Jerome Powell. I've got then 5 levels of peacetime to wartime. And then I can then start to make expenses. And I'll argue with myself, because that's what happens when you're crazy, is you argue with yourself. And the argument I'll have is there another successful business who's operating without this expense or without this service?
If
the answer is yes, then I know the answer is possible. It's a matter of probable and whether it is sensible. And so I can then strip away the ranking of how to spend money based on whether something is possible. For instance, when at the brokerage, when we got sent home for 15 days to stop the spread and flatten the curve, I thought we all were going to be back at work by Easter. And so, Easter came and went, and for some reason, no one was back at the office. Well, what I realized was I bet we don't need those office phones anymore. I bet people use cell phones now, right? And so we could kill the office phones. The next thought I had was, I bet we don't need this person answering phone and receiving checks. I bet you that when I go to Kroger or when I go to Walmart, there's somebody who greets me who's actually just working as shoplifting deterrent there. But when I check out with a robot scanner. I don't check out with a human. Those days are gone. But the gas station has now you place them on and it AI triangulates your little Debbies and then bills you accordingly. And so why pay a front desk person when they could do something that was more impactful with their time? We could either reallocate their excess or they could do something that brought them more fulfillment. And so we got rid of that position. It wasn't incredibly well received, but it was the right decision. I also wouldn't receive paper checks because that's foolish. We do have online bill pay, and it's time to join the modern America and get with that. Anything that someone else is doing in another industry or another business that I'm spending money on, I can look at for inspiration. I used to drive across town and pick up earnest money back when there wasn't like the online earnest money distribution platforms. Then I realized, oh, wait, I could just use Uber. I bet if Uber will deliver a person, it will deliver a check. I bet if Uber will deliver a person, it will deliver a car seat or groceries or all of those additional items. What's the difference? And so thinking then around the idea of like, how do I reallocate a resource to a problem that someone else has solved?
Eric, I want to jump in on that for a second and kind of tell a story. This actually just happened yesterday. I had my annual physical, and everybody's favorite time of the year.
That's right.
And it was really interesting about that aspect is everything is done into a completely different basis, kind of post COVID. And so I check into my doctor's office in the app. And I go sit down in the waiting room, and there's two elderly ladies that are behind the glass. And I'm sitting there waiting. 2 minutes goes by. One of them finally looks at me and says, "Have you checked in yet?" And I said, "Yeah, I did on the app." "Oh,
they needed you to check.
Let us double check." One came over and said, "Yeah, you need to check in with us." And I thought that was the whole point of the app. So literally, she took my information down, typed it in. I sat back down. Less than 10 seconds later, the nurse came out. So the app worked properly. Their positions up at the front desk are not necessary because of the efficiencies that have been developed through technology. And, quite frankly, and maybe other people can relate to this at doctors' offices, sometimes they're just not very friendly. And I'd rather just check in on my phone and then talk to the very nice nurse and the wonderful doctor and cut out the middlemen, if you will. It just blows my mind. And of course, I'm not going to say anything and make anybody feel bad, but what she did was redundancies. It wasn't useful. It just it added friction to it where it was frictionless until, that person came to the equation. And to your point, I'm sure there's better and higher uses of their time than to literally just say, "Let me type your information in," when I already did. So it's interesting to kind of think of those processes in life. And I'm sure we've all experienced those from so many aspects, any customer service or engagement level as a consumer. It blows my mind for sure. You bring up a good point.
Yeah, it's all over that redundancy, that waste. I mean, we bought a car not because I wanted to, but because we had to essentially, and because there's nothing worse. I'm looking forward to buying a car less than my 40-year-old colonoscopy or whatever I have to do nowadays, whatever that is.
Oh yeah, good time.
Yeah. I'd rather do that than buy a car. And like they don't take wire. They didn't take wires. So I got to get a check. Makes perfect sense.
Unbelievable.
The other thing that comes to mind then, if I'm thinking about going back and creating an action plan, is oftentimes what I find is that businesses refer customers to their third-party vendors or affiliated partners or their allied resources, and they expect and get nothing in return. Oftentimes, think about it this way, that says, okay, I'm a landscaping company and I install the ABC Paver Company pavers on all of the patios. What is ABC Paver Company doing for me to help me grow my business while I grow theirs? Is this a one-way relationship, or am I getting back equal to or more than what I'm giving? Because what I'm doing is I'm making the sales rep's job really simple, so that they no longer have to, prospect for customers, because I'm prospecting and they get the upside byproduct. We see that happen over and over and over, where people fail to hold their third-party vendors, their affiliated resources, and their allied resources accountable to making it a win-win, two-way street of value exchange. Most stand with a handout, waiting for the company to send them money so that they can attach an add-on service. And so you got a couple options. You can either make it a win-win, or you can go opt to own that business instead.
Wow.
Amazon did it with with USPS, right? They said, hey, we're paying the Postal Service a lot of money. We're paying UPS a lot of money. We're paying FedEx a lot of money. How about we just do this ourselves? And that became the longer term direction, right? Is they vertically integrated to execute on the last mile of delivery so that they have more control, more financial optimization, more opportunity for people in the company, and so on. But it's holding those line items of expenses and revenue that you're sending to others accountable to make it a win-win.
That's a beautiful example for everybody to kind of look at too, Eric, because there's so many individuals as a business and entrepreneur that you are partnering with an association. No one does it alone. So to have full buy-in from everyone that you're associated with, and it is a truly two-way street, that's a healthy environment for growth on both sides of that coin. So but I think that people get wrapped up into relationships and what's comfortable or what they're used to. And I think that they forget how important it is to always reevaluate and look at what's happening. I love that you have kind of the nuclear plan and, kind of 5 variations of that just to see what's going on. And I think that we should be always auditing our personal sphere, and we should always be auditing our business sphere. Is it mutually beneficial? Are we investing the time? Are we bettering one another, or is it just very slanted into that nature? That's never healthy. But that's huge advice for everybody to tune into, for sure.
My last item, Greg, on the action plan here for somebody to go back and do is what I found is this is an interesting common thing that happens with business owners is I'll look at a P&L and if the staff costs are pretty high or there's, one line item that's disproportionately more expensive than others, I'll typically ask the question of, is this the most effective and is this the most efficient? Who in the organization is responsible for auditing efficiency and auditing effectiveness? Because what I want to know is every day someone has to own that responsibility of saying, when we jump on the lever and it spits out these little gumballs from the gumball machine, when I jump on this lever and get gumballs, is this the best way to do it? Or could there be a better way of getting gumballs without having to expend the energy to jump on the lever? If someone's auditing on a regular basis the effectiveness of that and the efficiency, it's then easy to understand where you have excess capacity, where you can make adjustments, or where you can reallocate your resources to understand if you have the right ratios of effective and efficiency. And that's a process that never stops.
Wow. And to me, that's huge. You're looking at it from a self-audit, business audit standpoint into yourself and into your organization, or the individual or individuals that are managing those expectations for efficiency purposes. But once again, we should always be self-auditing. We have to be honest. It's kind of a mental check. I think that's crucially important. And a lot of that is to just to be self-aware. I mean, Eric, there's so many entrepreneurs and business professionals that just kind of go through the flow and the motion, and they're not really being honest and intentional. I've heard it time and time again. People will say, "Stop living casual lives. Stop living casually," because ultimately, time is set for no man, and you don't know when it's up. So to have full intention and heart into what you're doing and how you're doing it. If you're going back full circle, right? As we talked about, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Take it upon yourselves to treat this as a business and taking care of your family and your colleagues and obviously your team that's around you. It is bigger than ourselves to that. And to your earlier point, hey, if you're just trying to be a great person, donate your time, donate your efforts, join a charity group. We're talking about businesses here and massive livelihoods, and there's a lot on the shoulders. But Eric, I love everything that you went through into this episode and more. Any closing remarks or anything to kind of wrap up this episode of Disruptance?
Profit is an obligation. If you choose to open a business, you are required to be profitable. You never know when that profit becomes the oxygen for the organization in the future. And when you have a pandemic and you can't open your doors and generate income, you will have wished that you were profitable in the past to pay to keep everything going in the future.